All right. Good evening and welcome to the school committee meeting of January 12th, 2022. We're going to take our executive session items first. We anticipate that those will be somewhere around 30 or 45 minutes, and then we'll come back for the remainder of our agenda. So I'd like to entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Fred? Mike?
Yes.
I'll vote yes.
Yes.
Hillary?
Yes.
David? Dawn?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Great. We'll see you in about 30 or 45 minutes. We are back. We are back. We are back. I should have mentioned, so this is my bad, I apologize. I should have mentioned we were going into executive session to discuss two items, so I'm going to read them for the public because I think I'm supposed to. Apologies for not doing it before, but I'll do it after. So executive session A, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares, and I do. The other item was B, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. The individual to be discussed in such executive session shall be notified in writing by the public body at least 48 hours prior to the proposed executive session, provided, however, that the notification may be waived upon a written agreement of the parties. Okay, so we have completed executive session. We are now going to jump into our agenda, and as we start all meetings, if we could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So, do we want to open up to public? I guess we can open up to public comment now if there is any. Otherwise, we can incorporate it in. Anyone? All set? Okay. I don't think we have Anna.
Anna was coming, but she might not be
She's still
here.
coming, do you know?
I don't think she's coming.
Okay, then awesome. Thanks.
If she does, we will slide
Yeah,
her.
no, I got word that she was not going to be able to make it.
Okay. The next item we have on the agenda is the meeting minutes. Go ahead, Dawn.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion to table the minutes for December 22nd and January 5th until the next meeting.
Yes. So I know these were somewhat lengthy because they encapsulated the discussion, and we did get them a little late. So I think Dawn was hoping to just for all of us to have a little more time to read them. So that was your motion?
Motion.
Second. Any additional discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Great. Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
So Michelle, can you just include those next time as well, please? Thank you. All right.
All right, awesome. So really good news. I want to update you on the middle school project. Members of the team, Mr. Small, Mr. LaMontina, Mr. Heineman, Mr. Farrow, Mr. Stanbrook, Mr. Stanlin, myself, met virtually with MSBA on Monday to go back and forth with the approval or the recommendation from the Whitman Middle School Building Committee of Collier's as our owner's project manager. Collier's put together a very nice presentation for the MSBA, and really without much discussion, just some kind of recommendations of where we are. The MSBA approved Collier's as our OPM. So it's a really good thing. We're moving in the right direction. One of the things, though, I want to clarify with this committee, one, I need to sign the contract. And I attached the contract I put the contract in the packet. Something that, when I spoke to Cliff Rhodes, who's our attorney, said, back in your minutes, did you ever have the school committee give the building committee broad powers to do certain things like this contract, like some changes once the OPM? And back in the minutes of 2020, we did not. We just appointed a committee. So I'm looking for two things from this committee. One, to authorize me to sign the Collier's contract, which it's been vetted more so than any other contract in the history of the United States. Two, to authorize the building committee to make changes or sign documents as long as the chair is a school committee member and we have school committee members on. I'm very comfortable with making that recommendation to the school committee. I think if the chair becomes somebody other than a member of our committee, since this is a subcommittee, we might want to revisit that. But right now, that would be my recommendation. Giving the one, allowing me to sign the Collier's contract so we can get this moving forward. Two, giving the building committee some broad power to sign documents that don't have to come back when we're in the OPM stage, when we're in the project development stage, that would slow up the process. That's very traditional of building projects. And maybe, Fred, you were on the high school building project, that's what you guys used to do.
Same thing, we voted everything now, you know, when it came to the final approvals, et cetera, it came before the whole committee after the building committee voted it.
Correct.
But, you know, the day-to-day, the changes, the building of it, you know, were handled by the building committee.
I just want to make sure we dot our i's and cross our t's. And when Cliff said that, we looked back, and that hadn't been the scope of that meeting. It was putting a committee together. Moving forward, now that we have an OPM, then we're going to the ball's going to be rolling quick. So I want to make sure we have that. So maybe I can get 2 motions there?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How often, the building committee, how often is that reorganized? So you just said that it's important that we have a school, because right now, the school committee member, you're the chair, correct?
I'm the chair, it's not reorganized.
It's not.
So it's set?
Yeah.
It's set.
So then we don't necessarily have to be concerned with, I mean, right?
I could drop dead.
I was going to say
You
win the
know what?
lottery,
You know
but.
what? Yeah, win the lottery. That came out of my mouth, I realized. But do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
there's no
I guess what are
reorg
the
every-
scenarios
no.
that we're looking
No,
at?
there's
That's
no reorg.
what I'm asking.
So is this you had said about the preliminary stages of the project, or is that what you're trying to get through the hurdles of?
Well,
Feasibility stuff.
through feasibility. So as the committee, we're going to meet, the OPM might say, we need to do this as a change. Instead of bringing that to the full committee, the building committee has authority to make those decisions.
Yeah, I just was wondering if it was open-ended, or if it was per a particular phase, that's all I'm asking.
No, right now, I think for the duration as we go forward with this project.
Okay, so I mean, you know, this project is on tap for how many years?
But could be 5.
5.
And I think,
And
again,
in terms of for how long?
and that's what I'm
That's why
saying.
I'm bringing it up.
Well, and that was my point. If there has to be a reorg, I would bring that to the committee,
Yeah.
depending on the chair.
Yeah.
I think we put the committee together pretty well with a diverse group of people from the community and school committee. And this is a subcommittee of the school committee. So your charge is still there. It's still a school building project. And we have 3 committee members, and I'm very comfortable, if you are, and this goes forward, that as long as the chair is a school committee member, they have that broad authority to make some decisions for this committee.
Well,
Yep.
and I'll just, you know, who knows what the future holds, but it would be my intention to see the project through fruition, even if my term elapses and I don't run again. And I would want to see it through as the chair.
And I
Continue.
Could be difficult, though.
So so do we want to get a working motion? Do you want to try?
I'd like, first motion is to allow me to sign the Collier's contract. on
That's
behalf of
probably the
school
easy
committee.
one.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Okay. Any additional discussion on that one? Done.
Can you give an example of what would be signed?
We're on the Collier's contract right now.
Oh, Collier's contract then?
Yes.
Just the initial contract.
No
This
questions.
is the easy one.
Right, no
I thought.
questions on this.
We're good. All right. All those in favor?
Yep.
All right, great, unanimous. Okay, now you're going to have to come up with a more
Yeah, so.
delicate motion. I
So then my next motion is to allow the school building authority,
Yeah.
the school building committee, to have broad power, and this is really undefined in law from Cliff, to sign documents on behalf of the school committee without school committee approval. So I would defer to Fred, being on the high school building committee, to give an example of some of those changes that had to be.
But hang on, so
sorry,
hold
I'm
on,
sorry,
because
yes.
I want to get let's get
Yeah,
the motion, let's
yeah.
get the motion clear, because poor Michelle's going to have to type it up.
I'm sorry, I did try.
So you said, say it one more time, and then I think you need to add on whatever you want
yeah.
for the chair.
So I'm looking for a motion to have the school committee provide the Whitman Middle School Building Committee broad power to sign documents as needed without school committee approval, as long as a member of the current school committee is the chair of the Whitman Middle School Building Committee.
And can we add, and I think this is understood, but can we add, and that the committee has voted the approval? Is that what you're thinking?
And the building.
The building
committee
committee, and the building
And the
committee.
Whitman Middle School
Right.
Building Committee has voted the approval of
Perfect,
that.
okay.
Yeah. and-
Great, so can somebody make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, great, now we can get,
Discussion.
now we'll give you first discussion, how's
So-
that? 'Cause you
so-
said you wanted to add something.
Well, on that?
Well, you were gonna go down another path, and I said, let's clarify the motion.
So I was going to ask,
Okay.
so Don asked that clarifying question. Give an example of that, what they would have to approve. Now, I have never been on a building committee, so I don't know. But Ernie told me today, he goes, there's just things that happen. But Fred was on this building
Right.
committee, so tell us what things happen.
And, you may be, if you're in a building stage, and most of it happens when you're in the building stage, not in the feasibility portion. You may have to approve payroll warrants.
Yes.
You need to make sure that you're in compliance, and that's more that'll fall to Mr. Stanbrook, of course, in compliance with all the procurement laws, the labor laws, et cetera, fair, and Mike, you know the words, and I've got the COVID brain, so.
What is it?
Prevailing wage,
wage.
thank
We
you.
approve invoices too?
Any invoices that there might be,
Invoices, we
which,
approve
for instance, we've already approved
Yep.
the advertisement. There was an attorney bill for looking over the RFP, those types of things. Basic housekeeping
Yes.
is what we're doing. And it is a Whitman project comprised of the Whitman people. So you do have the Whitman aspect of many Whitman people keeping their eyes on things as well.
Don?
Sure, just to clarify, you had just said there's lots to sign in the building stage, so I just want to make sure people understand we're not in the building stage yet.
Correct.
I do completely understand that and agree with you on that. There'll be purchase orders, they'll be purchasing all of the equipment
And
to build
that
it.
really doesn't.
But in the feasibility stage that we're at right now, for this motion, what, documents that would need to be signed, I get it, Beth, a few invoices
Yeah.
on, we've going to have an architect, right? And there'll be meetings about
Oh,
drawing up
designer. Designer's the
designer.
word.
Okay, surveys of, but,
And, there'll be the RFP for the designer.
Okay.
But the committee will vote as a whole,
right.
to approve the,
Yeah.
the money, so to speak, the advertisements, et cetera, putting it out to bid. The MCPPO, Mr. Stanbrook, will be handling 90% of that, if not more, in getting that and working with the attorneys. Then you'll get the attorney bill. But, the bills themselves, I believe, we're just gonna vote as a committee. We'll go through them and vote them, and that way there it's everybody, not, one person, so to speak.
That's good, just want to get an idea.
And Fred, remind me, just so the public's aware, we have how many school committee members? We have the three school committee members, superintendent,
Superintendent,
how many select,
Assistant superintendent.
One
one
select,
selectman,
finance committee
two
member?
finance committee members.
So I think it's right, so just for the public to understand, the authorization, this is a fairly broad, diverse, well-suited group, so the fact that they're voting things, again, to me, makes all the
town
sense.
administrator of
Yeah, it makes
Whitman.
all the sense in the world that
Building
we shouldn't be getting stuck in the quagmire of they approve something, it has to come here, we approve it, we don't meet for 2 weeks, so I'm completely in favor of what's being described here.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, move to the vote, all those in favor?
Thank you.
Unanimous, great.
So COVID update, it's here, we still have it. So before I get into some numbers where we're at, Lisa Tobin, George and I met on Monday, and our nurses are swamped right now with contact tracing. It's just becoming an insurmountable mountain due to the number of students that are testing positive. I contacted my local soups, and many of them are having the same issue, so I reached out to Desi, the commissioner himself, to say, is there going to be some changes in contact tracing? And he said, it's in the works. The phone call I actually took today during our budget subcommittee meeting was Commissioner Riley.
Oh.
And he said, it's not going to happen this week, but look for it early on next week. So we're in a holding pattern, but I just want you folks to know there might be some changes to contact tracing moving forward. It seems like our local DPHs are not contact tracing anymore. Mass DPH is not sending that out anymore. They are advising that if you are if you test positive, you contact your close contacts to let them know that. That happened to me in Pembroke. That was in early December. I don't know if that happened to you, Fred.
And I got the same letter last week, saying if you've been in close contact with someone, just let them know.
So right now, the schools are still close contact tracing to the best of our ability, but due to the cases right now, our staff is thin. So that might come out next week from DESE, and I'll update the community. But just to give you an update of where we're at, I'm going to do January 4th through the 12th. From the 4th through the 12th, and you might have some of these from last week on the 5th day. The high school had 105 positive cases with 13 staff. Hanson Middle had 52 with 6 staff. Whitman Middle had 51 with 11 staff. Duval 41 students and 8 staff. Conley 16 students and 6 staff. Indian had 38 students and 4 staff. Pre-K 4 students and 3 staff. Now if I look at just this week with just simple attendance, not COVID, everybody out. Hanson Middle on Monday had 80 students out. Tuesday had 78 students out. Wednesday was 73. Whitman Middle 79, 105, and 84. The high school on Monday the 10th was 161, 167, and today was 139. The preschool was 20 on Monday, 8 on Tuesday, and 17 today. Conley Elementary was 64, 65, 47. Duval 59, 73, and 63. And Indian Head was 72, 73, and 65. And just to give you an idea of staff right now, on the 10th at Conley, I had 3 staff with COVID, or 3 staff out, 1 with COVID. Yesterday, 6 without, 1 with COVID. Today, 4, 1 with COVID. Conley's my best school right now. Duval had 14 staff members out on Monday, 5 with COVID. Tuesday, 12, 6 with COVID, and today, 12, 6 with COVID. Food services in District 4 on Monday, 1 with COVID. Tuesday, 3, 2 with COVID, and then today, 2, both with COVID. Hanson Middle, 5 with 1. Tuesday, 4 out, 1 with COVID. Today, 6, 1 with COVID. Indian Head, 14 on Monday, 3 with COVID. Tuesday, 11, 2, and then today, 11 and 2. Preschool, 2, both with COVID, all 3 days. Whitman Middle, 15 out, 7 with COVID. Tuesday, 14 out, 8 with COVID, and then 12 and 8 with COVID. High school, 14 with 6, 18 with 9, and then 16 with 8. So that's where we're at. We're holding on. I'm hoping, from what I've read and what I've heard from DPH and what you've seen on the news, we're hitting a peak in next week. We have 3.5 days of school next week. Monday's a holiday. We have 3 days of school, and then there's a half day for grading day. And then we hit the next week, and hopefully we'll be on the downturn. The 5-day quarantine isolation that DPH has recommended has helped us with staffing to keep kids in school. As you've heard the governor say, we want to keep kids in school as much as we can. One of the recommendations from Lisa Tobin that I sent to the commissioner was, forget the contact tracing piece of it, and let's focus in on kids that might be close contacts and test them all here. We still can't just test kids here. You have to fit this certain parameter, meaning that if you're a close contact from home, I can't necessarily test you. I would like to test you, and we're asking that permission from the department to be able to do that. Our second dose or second round of test materials came in this week, so we have plenty of test materials that we're able to do that. We just need a change in the guidelines to give us the allowance to do that, and I think that'll be a better course of action for the district. Again, we're going to hold on that, but I wanted to let the committee know where we were at.
Yep.
So I just go back to contract tracing.
Yeah.
So can you explain how, so if a student tests positive on a Saturday, they go back 2 days. So it would be who they're around on a Thursday.
Correct.
Okay. So then in an elementary school, are we in this district contact tracing all the students in that class, or is it the kids they're sitting with at lunch?
We start with in class and then go to lunch, and lunch has become the challenges at the secondary level, less than the elementary level.
Okay, so meaning like you can't tell who's who because they're supposed to...
At the elementary level, the lunches have been able to spread out at the schools pretty good.
Yep.
The middle school at Hanson Middle has been easier to spread out. Whitman Middle has become it's a bigger lunch with less space, so it's difficult, and the high school has been the headache to contact trace. And this is one of the issues that 30 kids tested positive on Sunday trying to go back to, or Saturday, Sunday, trying to go back to Thursday with lunches at the high school. Yep. Kids are using a QR code, and that's how we know where people are sitting, but just by the overwhelming amount, Lisa and the staff was trying to just get the positives in and then go backwards. So it is becoming, and it's town-wide too. The towns just gave up. Yep. So we are still holding true to the best we can, but understand that it's the best we can do with the staff we have. And our nurses are doing a heck of a job.
Yeah, I guess my question is how, and I live it, so I understand how crazy it is with the contact tracing. You know, how I'm concerned that the commissioner's looking to change it, right? We know that they've changed the 5 days, which is great because kids are in school, but in my experience, kids are coming to school and they're still symptomatic because I can be back in 5 days, right? My concern if the contract, and this has nothing to do with you, this is probably just a general comment to the commissioner if he's listening, is that if we are going to say we're just not going to contact trace anymore, then we're running the risk of a student who's exposed, who's going home to we don't know what. And I understand that the nurses are overwhelmed and there's a lot going on, but there's a lot of concerns that I have about getting rid of the contact tracing piece, particularly when if you're exposed in school, you can test and stay. So that child can stay in school. It's not necessary for you, but that's just a general comment that I have around that and a concern.
Michelle had a question.
We're not testing and staying, we're not doing the test and stay for vaccinated kids, correct? No. Okay, I just double checking.
We're not allowed to do that either.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do that.
So another one of the recommendations from Lisa is to allow us to do that. And
okay.
And I don't know if that's going to change, because again, my son tested positive and was vaccinated, so he wouldn't have tested. So we had him tested. So I think Lisa really wants to open up, anybody that wants to test, we're testing.
Right.
You know, and if you think Chris and I are a close contact, you're vaccinated 8th grader, if you think you are exposed, you should test, and that might help that piece of it. Again, that's just a recommendation from her. We're not moving forward with that recommendation until I get something more from the state.
Fred?
You know, just add this, 97% of all cases, I was told today, are Omicron, and the Omicron vaccination doesn't
I know. Everybody that gets
it,
it's a breakthrough case, of course.
You know, so, I mean, to not test.
I know.
Ridiculous.
Right.
Okay, I'm good. So we have a couple of special guests today, our Director of Counseling Services and our Assistant Principal. And I think you're both co-chairs of NEASC this year. So they're here to present to you what the high school is doing right now as far as a decennial report. Our last NEASC accreditation was in 2012. These folks are going to tell you a little bit about what they've been doing because it involves the committee and maybe some meetings later on in the spring that the committee has to be aware of for our accreditation.
Great. Hey, everybody. How are you? I'm Ruth Kerrigan, Director of Counseling Services. And Dave and I, as Jeff said, we are the co-chairs for NEASC. So if you're not sure what NEASC is, it's the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. And basically, it's a nonprofit membership group. They have a couple different commissions. So there's a group that works with colleges and universities. So most of the colleges and universities that we know would all be accredited by NEASC. And there's also a division that accredits the high schools. So basically, we want to make sure we have high standards. And so we're part of NEASC. And it's basically an accreditation process that's in a cycle that goes every 10 years. And we're in a very active part of the cycle right now. In the spring of last year, Dr. Jones and Dave and I attended some webinars with NEASC to get ready for all of this. And we started in the fall, when we came back to school, Dave and I are the co-chairs, we established our steering committee, which it's made up of the curriculum coordinators. And there are 5 standards that we're going to be working on that Dave will talk about in a few minutes. And so the steering committee, basically, they're divided up and they're heading up each of those standards. And then all of our faculty has been assigned to one of those standards as well. So the whole school is working on NEASC. And we've spent basically every PD day, a lot of department meeting time in the period of self-reflection, a really kind of rigorous self-reflection. very comprehensive, and we're basically reflecting on the work that we do in the 5 standards. And what that's included, we had surveys that were sent out to students. So we've got some data from that. We have survey of faculty and staff, and there's also a survey of school community and parents. So hopefully a lot of you had a chance to weigh in on that information there. So we've taken that information, we've been working on our committees, and we're in the process of completing our self-study and basically identifying the strengths and weaknesses that we have. And all of those will become eventually part of our school improvement plan. So where we're at right now, most of the committees they've gathered their data, they're starting to write their reports. We'll be voting on those as a faculty sometime in the next couple of months in order to get ready for our collaborative conference. So what happens next is we finish up our reports, we vote, and all agree that what we say is what we do. And then in May of 2022, NEASC will be coming in to do a visit to us. And they've changed the terminology now, it's the collaborative conference. I believe they're coming in on May 19th and 20th. And the visiting team is made up of a small group of our peers. So for instance, there'll be someone from the NEASC organization, plus there might be somebody who's a principal, there'll be some teachers, maybe a counselor, and they'll come in to do basically a peer review of what we do here at Whitman-Hanson. As part of that peer review, they will look at our self-study that we did and really go through that kind of with a fine-tooth comb. They'll come in and spend a few days. They will meet with students. They will visit classes. They'll meet with counselors, faculty, staff. And basically what they'll do is validate the work of our self-study that we did, the self-reflection. Again, identify areas of strengths and also areas that we need to grow. So from that, again, that visit will be in May of 2022. We will develop a growth plan. We'll work on that for 2 years. And then we will have a decennial visit in the winter, spring of 2024. They'll come back to see, have we made good on our growth plan? Have we made progress on that? And there'll be another report. And then there's a series over the next few years, more reporting out of where we're at, what we need to make improvements upon. And then it all wraps up we start all over again in 2032. So a long time from now. But we're excited, we're working hard on it, and now Dave will spend a little bit of time telling you about the standards and what we've been doing.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks, Ruth. So just to go real quickly a little bit on what Ruth just talked about. So the faculty is divided up into each of the standards that we get from NEASC. They give us the 5 standards that we are conducting our self-study. Those standards, and I think they're in your packet, right? One is learning culture, student learning, professional practices, learning support, and learning resources. And within each one of those standards, there are principles. There are about 5 principles per standard. So it breaks those down in a little more detail. And we have to go through each one of those principles and kind of evaluate where we are with regard to each one of those principles. And it's not enough, as Ruth said, when they come in and they look at our self-study, it's not enough for us just to write a narrative and say, hey, we do all these great things. We have to provide evidence of where we're doing those things. And it's okay if there's areas that when we go through that we recognize maybe we need to be doing more there. That's part of the self-study. And personally, having gone through NEASC a number of times now, the process has changed a bit, and I think the process that they're having us undergo now is much better than in the past, because a lot of time was spent on providing needless reams of paper and kill them with boxes of things that they never really looked through. But this self-study has been really great, and it's great the way the faculty is broken up, because even within that, we're recognizing that we do some things really well that maybe some staff didn't even realize how well we were doing it in some areas, because maybe their day-to-day operations doesn't include that. But also some things have come out that are valuable that I think will be part of our self-improvement plan as we go forward. So once we go through, and we are very much in the process, we are very close to finalizing our reports, which have to be presented to the entire faculty as a whole, and we have to vote on each one of the standards. So when we go through each standard and look at each principle, there's a rubric that we have to follow. So when we look at each principle, if under standard 5-1, we have to then come up with a rating to say it's either not evident, we're initiating, we're developing, we're working on it, we're implementing, it means we're living it day to day, or we're transforming, we're shifting the paradigm, we are so far out in front of everybody else in this, and that's where we are. And then once we look at each rating on those principles, we come up with an overall rating for that standard. We either meet the standard or we don't meet it. And so each committee that's assigned to each standard will come up with that rating, present their narratives and their evidence to the entire faculty, and we have to vote on whether we agree with that finding of that standard committee or not. And if we don't, then we have to talk about why. And maybe if people say, hey, here's some evidence that you missed, that we really think we're doing better in that area than what that committee came out, then we would go back and relook at that. But ultimately, what we present to NEASC is what the school body as a whole, the faculty, is going to vote on and say, yes, this is who we say we are. And then NEASC will come in and say, we agree with who you say you are, and we'd like to see this. And that's where that development plan comes from. So I don't know if there's any specific questions. We could talk a lot about NEASC, but it might be information that you're not really too interested in.
Yo, sorry, Chris.
Just a quick one. Standard 1, learning culture. Learning culture promotes shared values and responsibilities for achieving the school's vision. Can you just speak to some specific things that the school has in their vision?
So I won't be able to speak to everything specific because I'm not in every standard committee. I chair like standard 5 and oversee, make sure we're running in the right direction, and they haven't presented their entire report. But I can tell you, so some of the things that are included that they would be looking at. For instance, the first principle in that standard under learning culture, they talk about the school community provides a safe environment. So what they would be looking at is, what do we have that provides a safe environment? And there's a lot of things that they would evaluate. So they would look at, what is our safety and security protocols? That could be everything from how we have doors that lock at 7:05 once the student's in the building, all the guests check in, and the procedures we have for visitors to the building and things like that, to what are some of our crisis protocols. If we, Alice, training that you're familiar with, and something I think we have some updated trainings coming this year on that for newer staff that haven't been a part of that, that would be part of the evidence that they would provide, that we do provide a safe and secure environment. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, safe environment pertains only to security? It doesn't pertain to safe learning environment, like
That's other standards.
that? Oh, okay. That's what I was kind of getting at.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. So, and one of the things you'll see is that there is some overlap within the standards.
Okay.
So, for instance, Standard 5 talks a lot about the physical plant.
Yeah.
So and they talk about safety there as well. So that would be the physical structure of the building. We are in a nice building that provides a safe environment. Our science labs are safe because they have the right spacing.
Yep.
But also, and so one of the things we try to look at is to make sure that we're not duplicating things. So in like Standard 1, they would also talk about things, safe environment, in terms of what do we have to help students in terms of the culture and the way students get along with each other. And some of those things, could fall into like the diversity and equity that Dr. Jones has been really working with those groups after school, and what the student council has done. Yeah. Even to the Best Buddies program that could fall into that, how we're integrating different players in this. So there's a lot of different evidence in both areas.
Does any discussion pertain to like teachers modeling behavior and things like that? So, to promote the kind of culture we're looking for?
I wouldn't say specifically that they're getting down to how an individual teacher is.
Just in general, like what our expectations are in terms of how we model behavior in front, when the students are around and whatnot, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't speak to specifically what's in their report yet because they haven't presented it, written it, so I don't know exactly.
And you deal with Standard 5, you said?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm meeting with all the groups and how they're going, but there's chairs, like as Ruth said, the curriculum coordinators, the steering committee, they're broken up. So a couple people oversee Standard 1, a couple oversee Standard 2. I happen to be on Standard 5, but also overseeing the whole process to make sure things are running, but not getting into their research.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
David, you folks must be getting into a lot. I mean, you can almost expand this, the COVID stuff, the air conditioners, the air purifier.
There's
a ton of stuff.
In Standard 5, that's it.
Yeah, well,
I
mean,
for
for each one you could have a bunch of things that are, all positives or made a positive impact, a change.
Yeah, and I can tell
That's
you.
off to you.
To your example, Steve, one of the things that we talked about in Standard 5 is, so there's a lot of mention of the things that have had to happen in the last 2 years relative to COVID, but we also don't want to just make that all the report, because we're hoping that's not where we're going to be going forward. So we also want to talk about things that are not COVID, right, that pertain to school that it used to be, and that we'll be moving beyond COVID, but certainly there's a lot of things in there of what the facilities has done to deal with COVID, and the changes that we've made to make sure everybody's as safe as we possibly can.
Excellent, excellent.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, David.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Ruth.
you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
very much.
All right.
Next piece, this on the annual agenda, my formative goals update was for this month, but I did it in December. So if you want to refer back to the minutes of December where I spoke about where I was with goals, I'll provide you another one in February, just as an update. But I also wanted to extend this invitation out for a virtual coffee or a real coffee or a walk and talk tour of the district. If you want to go and talk to me and say, you know, this is what I'd like to see, whatever, over the next month, if you want to schedule this prior to February break, I'd be very willing to do the virtual coffee, again, a real cup of coffee, or David and I have done a couple walks and talks the past couple of years to see what's going on in the district. What I would say is I'm going to give you a time frame. After that, we're going to move forward, so it's not an open-ended. Anytime you want to come in and talk, great, but around this formative piece, I looked for it to be scheduled prior to February break. And I think that'd be very good for both of us. Any questions or anything? You know, just shoot me an email and say, hey, want to do this, and we'll fit you in. The annual agenda has no changes this month. So that's that. And then district report cards. George, you want to give us an update where we're at?
Evening, folks. School and district report cards is something that DESE has been putting out now for the last 10 or 15 years. It used to be very cumbersome. It used to be very onerous on part of the schools themselves. But in the last few years, with the data collection increases and the way we've gone to collecting data daily, the state sort of puts the plan together for you, puts the report card together for you. Originally, this was on this calendar for January because the last few years, it's taken place in January. When this came up and we were looking at it, I said, oh my God, I haven't received anything. They usually have webinars, they usually have things. So I talked to the state, and they're a little behind. So they're going to solicit the information that they need. So what they do is basically they compile all the data for every district, and then all the data for every school in every district, and they post it on the DESE website. What schools have to do is check that, make sure it's relevant, make sure it's proper, and then they have to notify the families of where you would find that data. Some of the things you might be able to look at are, you know, how many teachers, how many students, how many socioeconomic groups, how many, what is average salaries, what is average scores. It's all of those things that are included in the school and district profile. It's a pretty good barometer for not only the public to see, but it's a pretty good barometer for schools and for people like yourself, because you also have the ability to compare like schools if you'd want to. So you can see the Abington compared to the Whitman-Hanson, you can see the Dayton-Rehoboth compared to a regional. And it also talks about areas that you might want to work on. Let's say, for example, our ELL population. You know, it would say how many students you have to how many teachers and things of that nature. So all of that will be coming out. We get notified those things are ready. We then have an opportunity and a time period where we make sure it's correct, and then we let parents know where to find it. We are a Title I school district, so as a result, we have to make sure we let parents know that it's there and it's out, but it's just late. So as soon as it is, we'll update everyone and we'll get out what we need to get out.
Good. Questions? Thanks, George.
Thank you.
John Stanbrook, since you've got the bulk of the agenda now, the man of the hour. John's got some reports to give to you folks.
Thank you.
Just keep your voice up, John, and you can take your mask off if you want.
And okay, I'll take this off. Just speaking up, right back on. The first item on the agenda is quarterly reports. So this is the monthly report that I've been sending out every month. Looks like this. This is the first part of that quarterly report. So this is a list of the budget versus the revenue and expenditures versus budget through December. And just about 19 pages. And again, I think I've talked about it before every month. That I grouped the expenditures into functions to try to better show what I think is where we're going as far as where we're spending it as opposed to on DESI function. On the revenue side, we have the budget is 56 million. I'm going to round numbers off to 56.7 million, 56.8 million. Right now, through 6 months, we've received 28.1 million, a little bit under half, or 49.6%. Again, that's how to read this report is, if you look down the bottom of total undefined, under revised budget is 56.8. Year-to-date actual is 28.1. Available budget, or what's left to receive in the year, is 28.6, or 49.6% of the amount that we thought we'd get in the budget that we've received so far. So I mean that's pretty much page 1 is revenue, and then page 2 through I think it's 19. 2 through 19 are the expenditures grouped by function. Like I said before, there's the budget and the expenditures in the column that's in the first 2 columns, and then the year-to-date actuals, and then the encumbrances, which means those are the things that have been are pledged to be paid but haven't been paid yet. So then the available budget. So you can see that for every line that's been voted. So I think we've gone over this in the past. So I mean that's that report. I have a little bit of a well, what I presented last meeting. When was that? December something. December 22nd was another sheet that had balance sheet comparison and revenue and expenditure comparisons on it. So that's the second page, second part of this quarterly report. At the top of that page, it has the balance sheet comparison, and those are all accounts that are on the balance sheet: cash, accrued payrolls, and fund equities. Then the comparison of where they are, where we were in fiscal year 21 through December, and then where we are through fiscal year 22 through December. It's kind of comparison from last year to this year. Then there's a column for the difference, and then there's a column for the percentage difference. And then in the middle part is a revenue and expenditure comparison between revenues and expenditures, revenues based on type and expenditures based on function. And then down below, there's a fund equity report of where we are on fund equities. And just to make it a little bit easier to look at some of these reports, the way to read this would be if the year was to end on December 31st, and there weren't any encumbrance changes, or weren't any encumbrances at all. I'm sorry, let me restate that. And we didn't use any E&D in the budget. Then up the top there where it says total fund equities of 3.6, that would be an 87%, $87,000 increase over last year. Now that's not realistic because there's going to be encumbrances. There's going to be, there may or may not be use of E&D, but that's the kind of where we're going on this. It's a comparison, or at least where I'm going with it. It's a comparison over last year, like for like, again with some timing differences of about $81,000 down the bottom for the fund equity. A new form that I came up with, and I brought it in front to the budget subcommittee. Was that last week?
Last week.
Was sort of a breakdown of. And that's this one. It has some highlighted columns. So this was
What's that one labeled on the top, John?
Part C.
Part C?
Sorry, it's Part C.
Great, thank you.
This is a breakdown through December of line items by function. Again, comparing fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22, and then any differences in dollars, and then any differences in percentage. So the column on the left is the DESI code. The budget grouping is obviously the budget grouping. And then where we are where we were back in fiscal year 21 through December where we are now through fiscal year '22 through December, and then the difference. And the highlighted items, I was going to go into a little bit of more depth because this is a quarterly report. I wasn't going to go do that on every month, but it's a quarterly report. Some of the highlighted items that, again, I looked at each grouping of administration, instruction, pupil services, operations, and maintenance. Tried to pick out what the bulk of the difference was year to year, and then tried to do some research as quickly as I could. Again, I have limited resources and time, but I tried to do the best I could of why we would be over on those two line items, from year to year between 21 and 22. So the first one is DESI Code 1410. That's the first highlight. It's business and finance. Last year was 181,000. Again, rounding the numbers off. This year it's 229,000, and that's an easy one. That's me. So I get paid. Thank God. Thank you very much. And I wasn't here last year, and I'm here this year, and that's the difference between us. The second one is that's the difference between years. I'm sorry. The second one is 2110. A curriculum directors is an increase of 61,000 or 20%. So doing some research with Mr. Farrow, we ended up finding that we have a tech person that's charged to curriculum directors. That's going to be a correction. I'm going to try to, I'll get to that as soon as I possibly can. So that's a known variance that I need to correct. That's just someone that wasn't charged properly. That will get rid of that. That was what that variance was. That's part of the reason why I'm doing this. Is it's helpful to me to learn every single account, inside and out, upside down, every way possible, and make sure that when something like that happens, then I know that won't happen again, and we can go forward.
Hey, John, I think Fred has a question on that line.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Where that curriculum line is inflated or increased because of somebody that's in the wrong place.
Yes.
Where they belong, is that deflated or?
Yes.
Because they're not being charged to that line?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So that's what's going on there. 2305 is classroom teachers. Again, the highlight there is 528,000 from the year-to-year difference of 7.6 to 8.1. And that was, I've got social studies and elementary and ELA and math teachers were in there, and they were, no, I'm sorry, I have the wrong thing. So that it has, there have been some charges, I skipped one, I apologize. So going back, there have been some charges that haven't been charged to grants yet. So again, I'll be working with Mr. Farrow to try to figure out who's supposed to be charged on grants. Right now, the default is to charge them to the 2305 account. Until we can charge them to the correct account, we're going to be working on that to try to straighten that out. But that's one of the variances there. Skipping down to 2410, textbooks, software, media, and materials. That's what I had just said. I'm trying to read my own notes and couldn't read my own writing. That's a $368,000 increase, or 133%. And so last year we had a middle school social studies, elementary, ELA, and math of about $400,000 that we had encumbered, but we hadn't received yet. That did finally come in early in the year in fiscal year 22. Out of the encumbrance from last year, we've paid it. So again, I guess that's probably a good thing to bring up, is that these expenditures include encumbrances from last year. It's total expenditures in the line item. So that's what happened on that one. Transportation services, again, skipping down to $3,300, $135,000. We have had, that's 13% increase. An increased busing routes during on Wednesday. So I'm going to need help on this one, George. I'm sorry, but it was, we had it last year on Wednesday, and now we don't. I apologize. I don't remember.
Okay, I'd like to read exactly what you said so I can make sure I heard it. Oh, last year we didn't have busing on Wednesday. So last year we had 4 days. So as a result, on Wednesdays there were no buses. So if they were very limited for a small population. So that's why it was less last year.
There's an increase, right?
Also, some of the special ed costs this year are higher because due to COVID, it still continues, the number of students who need van transportation for their specialized programs, we used to be able to put like 4 on a van, and now we have to put 1 or 2 max, like 1 seat and 1 seat. So that's some of the fluctuations in the transportation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I couldn't remember if we had it last year or not, and I didn't want to say the wrong thing, and Custodial Services, to skip down a bit to 4110, that's the next one, $323,000. We have had an increase in our our cleaning contract. It's a new contract, but that's something to take a look at. That's I had a little bit of a chance to take a look at it, but I haven't had a lot of time to delve into it. So unfortunately, I was able to look at it quickly, realize that we had an increase, but that is not all the amount there. So I need to do better on that, but I haven't been able to at the moment, unfortunately. Again, as we go forward in March, I'll be able to, when I do this again, I'll have more answers, but this is something I just didn't have the time, unfortunately, to get rolling on. Utility services, $113,000. And that's 61,000 of that is the Whitman sewer bill that has been there, and we've talked about that several times, I think. And then the rest was increased electric use, and that was due to we had a rooftop unit during the summertime that had locked up and was running all the time, 24 hours a day, and we had some significant electric use on there. And employee retirement, 5,100. That's an increase of 266,699. I think I've talked about this one every month when we've gone over another form. This is the increase over the budget for mass teachers' retirement. It came in at a 9.2% increase, I think. That was amount over the budget. That is going to be a deficit that's going to have to be closed by the end of the year. So that's what's going on there. Employee separation costs, $136,000. That's the name of the account. That's what DESI calls that account. But it's really people that have retired, and it's also other one-time stipends that people get paid. We've had in July and in the beginning of the year this year, we had 4 retirees that we paid out. And that came to $191,000. So any accruals of sick time, vacation time, or anything that people have coming comes out of that account. So that's what's going on there. And then the last one, the tuition to charter schools, that went from $348,000 to $459,000, or $110,000 increase. Again, that's a cherry sheet assessment that's a state aid. That's right from the state. The state assesses that amount, and they decide what they're going to send us and what they're not, what they're going to charge us, what they don't. So that has increased over last year. So again, this is a brand new form that I kind of came up with, and we talked about it in the budget subcommittee, but this is the first time I brought it forward to the regular committee, and I hope you find it useful, and I can move on, or you can take questions, whatever you want to do.
Any questions? No, I mean, I think, John, I think what you're trying to do is just trying to share a little more detail and share with the committee what you're looking at and what you're chasing at, and when you see things that don't line up to expected values, you're trying to help us all understand why.
Yes.
So that's helpful. Yeah, Don.
Thanks. Thanks, John, for all the detail. The last line, when I look at, I like to sort of compare the school choice and the charter school tuition.
Mm-hmm.
So these numbers are just up through December of what we're charged.
Yes.
If I look at this, would be the overall annual budget, right?
Yes.
So on the first page, and I just look at comparisons, right? Like, so school choice, we budget to receive reimbursement for $246,000. So those would be students who are coming into our district, so we get reimbursement for that. And then on the page 18 is the cost of school choice. So that's the tuition going out. Students we can't control if they go to other districts. And that's budgeted or expected at $258,000. So it's really just informational, but the comparison is we're almost breaking even with that now. $246,000 coming in and $258,000 going out. And I know, Jeff, you've talked a lot about, the benefits of the students coming to the district, and we're able to fund staff positions and so forth, but it might be helpful, or I'd like to see, going, if you have time, 5-6 years ago, what we got and how that's changing, because that really ties into our budget going up, our assessment going up. If we used to get $600,000 in, school choice revenue coming in, it was only costing us $200,000, we were making $400,000. It was helping our budget.
Correct.
And then as that dwindles, we still have those expenses. So I just, it's important to see that money coming in and out, and same with the charter school. That's a big difference too, because that's, we get reimbursement from the state on the first page of $125,000, but on page 18, it's $800,000 costing for students who do choose to go to a public charter school, but that's a expense line of $800,000. So nothing for, not a question for you, but really an observation of that piece of the reporting. So.
Thank you, Don. All right. Carry forward.
So just to keep rolling, the Part D of 9A would be the final in the quarterly report is the list of all the funds that in the district and the fund name. It looks like this. So it's the fund number, the fund name, and the general ledger. The beginning balance of the year, at the beginning of the year, the revenues we've received during the year, transfers in and out, and then the expenditures on through 12/31. Again, these are all these things are unaudited as we go. The audit will come at the end of the year. And just some highlights on this for the quarterly part of this is I've had several questions of circuit breaker. So circuit breaker is on this sheet is called a grant, and it's third from the bottom of the first. That's on page 1, about middle of the way through, 4,400 circuit breaker. So that line there is the beginning balance was 1.3 million. Again, I'm rounding the numbers off. This year so far, from the state, we've received 860,000. Expenditures that I've transferred so far are 665,000. So the ending balance is 1.5 million. Again, rounding the numbers up. So how to read this report is where we started at the beginning of the year, what we got during the year, what we spent so far during the year, where we are at the end of the month, or the end. This will be at the end of the year. I do this report every month, but and I think you saw it in November, I believe, but I was only going to be giving it every quarter, but I can give it every month. It doesn't matter. So that was one thing that stood out. I want to make sure I mentioned that. Also, again, about halfway down in the second grouping of revolving funds, number 4514, community evening school for $28,880. That's a negative. And we don't charge for community evening school anymore. So there used to be a revolving fund where we would get revenues for that. We don't get revenues for that anymore. That is a negative amount, and that's going to be something that's going to have to be carried. We're going to have to. I should go back and say that any deficit at the end of June will come off the district's E&D account. So at some point in the closeout process, or sometime before, if I can get to it, I will. We'll have to transfer that 28,880 out of that fund because it can't have a deficit at the end of the year. But this is something for another discussion. But that amount we don't get a revenue anymore, so it's difficult to see how that could be a revolving fund when we don't get revenues to offset the expenses that we have. On the page 2. Again, going back real quickly, it's grants on page 1, then page 2, it's all the revolving funds. Page 3, I'm sorry, I skipped over one that I wanted to talk about back on page 1. I apologize, I'm jumping around. And I'm going to talk about this later when it comes up under 5CF. Fund number 4600, a COVID-19, again, that's what it's called. It was a negative 1.6 million. That's the CARES Act money from Plymouth County. Great work by both the town administrators of both Whitman-Hanson and the accountants and whoever had anything to do with being able to get us the money from the county, through the feds, but through the county we finally got the last of it in December, I believe. So we've gotten all the amount of money that I thought we would be getting at when I closed the books in 2021. Now, we'll be talking about something later on that it came up at the last minute. And if you look at that column where it says transfer out, there's a $74,000 amount there. That's if you go back to the first page where the revenues are, you'll see that is a transfer in, I hope. Yes, it is. It's an interfund transfer in. It's a little bit off because there's been some cents being transferred in and out. So what happened there was in fiscal year 20, when we closed the books, okay, I'll step back a second. Once this isn't, the district isn't like a business where we can go back and restate earnings for fiscal year 18, fiscal year 19, fiscal year 20. Once the Department of Revenue certifies our balance sheet, that's it. You can't go back and change that balance sheet. The only thing you can do is amend the balance sheet in the current year. So in fiscal year 20, there were $74,000, again, round the numbers off, $75,000 worth of costs that were not transferred to this revolving fund. They were paid out of the general fund, and the FY20 budget the FY20 general ledger was closed out with those amounts in the general fund. They weren't moved to this fund. And if anyone is used to the FEMA snow removal type of reimbursement from the state, it's sometimes, how about that? Sometimes fiscal year 13, you'll apply for money from FEMA, and you won't get it until fiscal year 15 or fiscal year 16. If you don't set that money aside and know that that's coming, whenever that money comes in, that's general fund money because you've closed off fiscal year 13. So that's what happened with that. There was $75,000 worth of costs that we were getting reimbursed for, but it wasn't broken out into the fund. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because, Mr. Simonak is going to be talking about last-minute CARES Act submission. What I did in fiscal year 21 was similar to what happened in 20. I did not know that we'd be putting in for a last-minute thing. I didn't think we had any more money coming. So. I don't know if that's a long-winded explanation of why there's money. When money comes in that's already in a closed-out year, it's general fund revenue, and that's what I transferred the remaining balance to that because that's what the amount that was in there. Page 2 again. Sorry about that.
So John, just kind of John, I guess maybe in the interest of time, right? Because I'm looking at I know you have. 7 items and we're on the first one.
I want to be thorough, and
I know, and I know you do.
Say that I didn't cover something.
No. And I appreciate that, but I'm trying to balance the, we got 6 other items we want to hit. So I think everyone has access to the information, right? The public has access to the information. The committee has access to the information. Is there any questions kind of on the reports before? And if you want to keep going, we can keep going. I'm kind of watching the clock. I know we got other stuff to get through.
I don't have my watch on today, so...
we're about 20 minutes in, and we're on A, and we got to get to G.
So I will move quickly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's the end of 9A. Deficit update. This is a one-page one that looks like this. I've been giving it to you every month. The last few months I've been saying that I'm going to be looking into these. I've looked at a couple of them, but I have not had a chance to go look at the ones that are under review. The total for the deficits, known deficits as of right now, are $437,000 or 0.77 of the budget. I'm hoping, I'm being honest with you, after today, every day is going to be the budget until February 2nd. So it's likely on February 9th's meeting, this may not change very much. And that's the reality of where we are at the moment. I apologize for that, but that's just the way it is, unfortunately. Fiscal year 20, this is 9C now, I think? No, 5C, I'm sorry. Fiscal year 21 update. So this is the fiscal year 21 audit update. The audit, the fiscal year 21 audit, I sent in all of the documentation to the auditors already. That happened last year around November 10th or so. I sent it to them, I think it was the 29th or the 30th, so we're about 40 days behind. I did talk to the auditor for Clifton, Larson, and Allen. I can say that.
CLA. Go with CLA. It'll be easy.
CLA, okay. She assured me that it would be done probably in February. I'm pushing for February 9th, but I'm not sure. I know in the timeline, it was supposed to be at this meeting. I don't like not hitting goals and timelines. I apologize for that, but again, that's where we are. We're 40 days behind on it. The student activity proposal is the next one, 5D. That's this one. So this is a proposal from CLA to do the student activity fund procedures that I think we talked about that the committee wanted to see, and their proposal came back to me, and it's $14,700 in fiscal year 21, $7,700 in 2022, and $7,700 again in 2023. So it was a 3-year quote, and it gives the proposals, and there's a place to sign. And I didn't want to sign without giving it to the committee or ask someone else to sign, so I didn't know.
So John, just to clarify, this is something that's required, right? We talked about this in a previous meeting. This is something required we hadn't done. I think you took the charge of making sure we're going to get done. And I think the other point you clarified with me as I was walking in is while they're locking in the prices for 3 years, we're not committing to use them for 3 years.
That's correct.
So we can use them for this year to do it. They're already doing our existing audit. That at least gets us to the point where we have done the audit for the activities accounts, and then we can always make a subsequent switch if we decide. So, yes? Okay. Fred?
Are we under any time constraint to get this done? Or would we have time to put out an RFP and see who else is out there?
So I think the audit for, help me understand the year, the audit is presently being done by CLA for FY
21.
Yeah. So this would be adding, so that's already well underway, and that's what's
their normal
correct
little booklet we get every year in the fall.
So this would be adding on the student activities portion to that audit. Later on in the agenda, I think we are going to talk about our audit firm and whether we want to continue to use CLA. I won't speak for John, but it probably wouldn't make sense to make a switch for a small piece rather than the whole thing overall. Is that kind of where you're going, Fred?
And yeah, I mean, it's insanity that we've had this firm, but I'll save that for the different discussion.
There you go. Right. Okay. So do you need us to vote that, or you're just making us aware that you?
I'm just making aware that this is out there, and you can.
Anyone have any concerns? Otherwise, he's signing this, I think. Okay, great.
All set? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. This is letter E. This is the fund establishment under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53E. That's 53(3), I'm sorry. We are going to be charging for, and we have charged since October. We've gotten a small amount of money. If you go back to the list here, I think it's $930. What had happened was we've been receiving reimbursements for broken and stolen books, tech, and
Chromebooks.
other media.
Chromebooks. So prior to this year, we didn't really distribute many Chromebooks. Now we're really one-to-one, and we have replacement costs and damage costs, and we need a place to put the money, that it goes back to there, and we don't have this account. So John brought this up to you today because it could be a lot of money. If students don't return their Chromebook, it's $250, $300, $400 that isn't just going to go into the general fund. It has to be specific to this according to the law.
So this would be a new fund.
This is a
It
new
will show
account.
up in the monthly, quarterly reports.
Yes.
We'll see the number. Okay. Do we need to vote to authorize it, or you're just making us aware?
Just
that it's
making
gonna-
aware so that
No, that's great.
I didn't just create it. And
Yes, no, that's fantastic.
So that was 9.5. So 9.6, I'm sorry, I'm counting in my head, but these are the letters here. I apologize. So it's 9F is our CARES Act update. So we had the district put a total of $1.856 million in for submission to the county for COVID-related costs through the CARES Act, and the county was able to fund the entire amount except for $212.84, which they rejected. So the total that we did finally receive, we received $172,774.36 in fiscal year 21. We got the balance this year, fiscal year, finally, again, with the last payment being in December. So that's just kind of an update. We've gotten all the money that I thought we would get when I closed the books in August, but then subsequently.
So let me just jump in on that. On December 28th at 9:45 a.m., Representative Cutler called me and he said, "Hey, Jeff, Hanson's got like $600,000 left in County CARES Act. Does the district have anything that they could submit as reimbursables? And you have to do it like today." So it's the 28th. It was really due on Thursday. So I reached out to John and I said, "Is there anything we can scrape into?" Because Josh was very upfront. He called Lisa Green, he called all the Hanson offices and said, "We don't want to leave money on the table. It's just going to go to the Fed." When we closed in the summer, really, after discussing it with both town administrators, we had pretty much exhausted what was the allowance for us as a regional school district under the CARES Act of what the towns were being provided. But it seemed like there was money on the table from Hanson. So I emailed Lisa Green and I emailed Lincoln. Lisa came back and said, "Yeah, Josh called us too. We're scrambling here." And I got an email back from the town saying, "We've exhausted that, but we appreciate you asking. If you had asked a little earlier, maybe we would have found something," but they had exhausted their accounts. So I got back in touch with Lisa, got in touch with John, and we did do a submission that hasn't been approved yet by the county. But again, based upon what our state rep was like, go for it, see what you can do. And I know the town of Hanson submitted us on our behalf, and I think submitted something on the town of Hanson's behalf for CARES Act reimbursement. We did have some outstanding funds. Again, we had thought we had pretty much closed FY21 with anything that was out there. I appreciated Josh's call, and I just want to make you aware of this as we go forward. We haven't received anything back, and as John said, if anything comes back into this from this CARES Act, John, it's going to go into the general fund, correct, by law?
Yes.
Because we've already closed 21.
Because I've already closed. I did not know this was going to happen. I couldn't see tomorrow, unfortunately. So it was it's general fund money, and the amount that that I submitted to we submitted to the town of Hanson was $614,907.35, and they went to the county for 40.04% of that, which is $246,208.90. So $246,000, and it was related to long-term sub-hires, additional pay for a COVID response lead nurse, and then overtime for remote support. So those are that's what happened with that.
Okay, so we'll brief you when we get that. And then, John, you have the unpaid bill?
And so I remember...
and this has to be a vote?
Yes, this is a vote. This is, I think we had I think it was October, we had some unpaid bills. I can't remember when the last meeting was. Chapter 4464 requires any amount left over from the last fiscal year that doesn't have a sufficient appropriation to be voted before it can be paid. This one is a bill to our financial advisor of $550 dated June 11th. That's last fiscal year. I believe what happened here was we moved our treasurer from an office that he had in one part of the building to another part of the building, and it got lost in the shuffle. We didn't know about this until, I think it was November when it finally turned up. So if the chair would like to...
Yep.
Motion to
approve. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, before we go to the vote, this does require a 9/10 vote, just so all you know. Question? Yeah.
Can fall, obviously not towards you, can fall through the cracks, whatever. How does the other side, the company, sit there and say, geez, it's been 7 months. Should I send them another bill or reminder? I don't know of anyone that doesn't do that. Or if someone's name is clearly on here, which is the treasurer, it's not making sense to me.
I can't answer that.
I know, and I don't know if anyone can, but it's really, and I appreciate you finding me, so obviously not tossing it at you. It makes no sense. I'll vote for it, but I really don't like it. I'm going to vote with my right hand.
Don?
A question on what the $390,000 ban is actually for? Like the invoices for advisory fees on $390,000 ban. Bond anticipation note, right?
Isn't that the Town of Hanson AC project?
Could be,
Yes.
but I don't know. It's the HVAC for Hanson? Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So
The
maybe.
district pays that? If that's a loan for the town, one of our member towns,
Good question.
district pays it, will that get,
Yes.
okay.
Sorry, is your
The question is that a district expense? Certainly, we secured the note on behalf of the town of Hanson, I believe, and I know we've done that. But the cost for the advisory fee, I just wonder if it gets charged back to the member town that loan is for.
It does not. Well, it hasn't in the past.
Okay, yeah, maybe that's,
Well, isn't there the provision on the assessment sheet? When we're assessing the town, there's the separate charges that are particular to the town. Wouldn't that be as part of those charges?
In fiscal year '23, charges like this would be in that capital assessment.
Okay, so we can perhaps, we should be able to charge for this, even if it's in '22, I would think. Because this, obviously, this invoice came after we had voted our FY '22 budget. And I want to say those ban anticipation notes were signed September, maybe?
I don't know if it sounds right, but
I want to say it was about September. You and I had to
Yep.
sign them. You know, so therefore they couldn't have been included in FY '22. They'd have to be in FY '23. And the only reason why we have this bill is because that is how Hanson decided to finance. You know, the same as with the Whitman Building School project. If there was a ban note, I would think, you know, the town of Whitman would pay for that. You know, so to speak, it shouldn't come to the folks of Hanson, you know, for that. So, I mean, we've got to pay the bill.
Right.
But I would appreciate if we can look up and see how we can pass along that cost back, you know, to the town on the assessment sheet.
Yes, I'll do that.
You know, Don, thank you for catching that. That was a good catch.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Motion to pay the bill.
We already motioned?
I think we got a
Oh, we
motion in a
did
second.
motion already?
We were in discussion though, but it's okay. Everyone's good moving to the vote? Okay, all those in favor? Great, unanimous.
And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for all the information. Okay, member town audits. So we had discussed this at our last meeting and we said we would put it back on the agenda. When I say our last meeting, not the circuit breaker meeting, the actual full school committee meeting before that. You know, I think the only thing I would suggest, so I had it back on here in terms of, is there anything we want to do in consideration? One second. I did receive a call from Lincoln today, from Whitman, who had said that, you know, he was aware this was on the agenda and said at this point, really, I think his thought was that the schools would support an audit if and when it does come to fruition. But from a cost standpoint, he really didn't think that that was a big deal. So we can spend some time on this, but for me, what I'm recommending is at this point, we'll let the towns do their thing as it pertains to the audits. If they do make requests, we certainly will work with them to provide them the information they need in a timely fashion. So if there's additional discussion, great, but I'm not looking for a motion.
Okay. And I had, you know, seen that last full meeting. You know, my personal opinion, it's pretty much what you just stated. I don't think that the schools should be getting in the habit of paying for this type of an audit. The two towns want to fund it. That's great. It's their independent audit, and I would hope that we would give them every bit of assistance possible to get them whatever they need, or their auditing firm, you know, so that they can complete it.
Okay. Thank you for it. Beth? Yeah.
And I was going to say the same thing. I was going to bring up to suggest that we don't participate in it, because if that's their request, they can do it. We already have our audit, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it
That
sounds
works out
like we're,
great.
okay, I just wanted to make sure we close the loop, because if we say we're going to put something on an agenda, then I want to make sure we put it back.
Motion to pass over?
We don't even need to pass over it. I think it was just discussion, so. Okay, now we're moving into circuit breaker follow-up and next steps, yes? Okay, so a few things. I know I got a few of these, Jeff, you got some. So these are just follow-up items from last time that we didn't get to. One was the treasurer role and job description. I think I just wanted to make sure that the committee would looked at that. We should not have a conversation about the treasurer's functions and specific to what he's done or hasn't done, but I think the important part to understand is what's in that job description, specifically the requirements, and then maybe think about that because it is a part-time role as well. So if the school committee may want to start to consider working with the administration, what is that role? Are there other things we'd expect that position to do? So everyone has that. It's in the packets. There's nothing specific we need to do with that tonight. Audit firm. So this one I talked to John and Jeff a little bit about. The simplest way to say it, without maybe having a ton of discussion, but we can have discussion if we'd like, is that notwithstanding issues that have occurred, it's good general best practice to switch accounting firms. So we have CLA, we've had them for a long time. In speaking with John, he seemed to think that there's some other very good firms out there. And he also seemed to think that this is not something that would require us to go out to bid for, as long as it's under the 50,000, which it is presently. So I think in the conversation, what I was hoping we would do as a committee is give John the opportunity to go out and look at other firms and then come back to us with a recommendation on whether it's staying or going somewhere differently, but giving him kind of that charge and flexibility to do that research and understanding, and then at a subsequent meeting, they can come back. If he has someone they can present, we can ask questions, that type of thing. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with the committee, but fire away.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's time for another company to take a look, in a different lens, and also to define the roles and responsibilities of the auditing firm, so that we have a good expectation of what we should be receiving from them. I would have expected some of the happenings over the years to have been caught by a good auditing firm, and perhaps that's not what we're contracting them for. So we should, know what we want for specifications. My only concern is, does John have enough time on his plate to do that right now? And, could he guide somebody in doing that, to give him some assistance?
So John, you want to speak to this one? I mean, your thoughts? So, and again, we're not talking about FY 21, this would be 22. So we're still working on wrapping up 21. So CLA is still doing the FY 21, but your thoughts on the level of effort to reach out and look at some other firms?
I mean, it'll take some time, obviously, and then, and unfortunately, I'm not 30 years old anymore, so I have a limited amount of extra capacity, but if that's what the will of the committee, I have no problem doing that.
Do you have the physical time?
So I think, Fred, it depends on the timeline that we're looking at. So John, what do you think would be a good timeline? When could you get this done? I know right between now and February 2nd, we're strung out with budget. Then we're going to be working on the budget there. What do you think, in your professional opinion, how long would it take for you to look at a firm or multiple firms and bring a recommendation back to the committee?
So usually when this happens or this type of thing occurs, at least in my experience, it's after the audit's been completed. So again, theoretically, let's say March, because it doesn't happen in February, sometime between March and June would be a good time when the audit firm comes and gives their audit to the school committee. It's done, it's completed. They're working on those side audits, and if they do, and that's fine. But that window between March and June, because the auditors really have to get rolling again in the next fiscal year pretty soon in July and August. So this is probably 3-month March to June, in my opinion.
So if you could bring a recommendation to this committee in May,
yes,
to hire somebody for July, if it's not CLA, May would be the target date. Is that sufficient for you?
Yes.
Okay. Is that okay with the committee? So.
Yeah, and I think the only thing to add, so Fred, and correct me if I'm wrong, any audit firm, and I believe it was in our packets last meeting when we went through circuit breaker, they do provide an engagement letter that does specify this. I think it's like the scope of services or something like that. And that letter does say, Fred, compliance with all applicable regulations. So it's in there. To your point now, I think if we do look at someone else, they will give us a very similar letter of engagement. John can look at that if he wants us to look at that, great. we can look at that letter. But we don't have to recreate the wheel. Every audit firm for every audit, financial audit that I've ever been a part of, they send you that letter that specifies like the scope and this is what they're going to look at, this is what they're going to do, and all that goes with it. So that should be taken care of with what John's doing, I think.
It's a standard boilerplate letter, but again, if you wanted to change that letter, you would, and engage with
Correct.
some other things, you could.
I mean, I would acquiesce to your newfound knowledge of, you know, how our budgets operate and what the DESI rules, the Mass General laws and DESI rules and regulations are, you know, to make sure that they're going to be looking for the right items to make sure that we're doing everything correctly. Because as we know, that wasn't done in the past, and Clifford Larson did not pick that up, even though they say they're going to.
Okay, thank you, John. All right, so we're good on that one. I think the next item, do you have this one?
Yeah, so in your packet too, last at the circuit breaker meeting, Mr. Tuffy read a primer from DESI. I said it was DLS, it was the DESI primer, so it's actually in your packet. I don't need to review it, but I just wanted you to see the document he read from to make sure you had it in your hands. So you can look at the DESI primer. I think Mr. Kane referred to it, and it's in the packet. All this stuff will be online as well, but I know we spoke about that. MASBO best practice. MASBO hasn't reached out back to us yet. And again, I'm not going to throw more at John right now, but we've been kind of swamped since last week. We'll get best practice at some point, and I'll report out to the committee again, trying to close the loop on best practice for circuit breaker. And last, on SPED stabilization overview in your packet is the DESI advisory on special ed stabilization. I think we should read it thoroughly through and then make a decision as a committee moving forward if we're interested in doing the SPED stabilization account. You can read it through. It does require a vote of the school committee. It requires a vote of both towns. It requires a vote of the selectmen to authorize different funds in stabilization. Yes.
Okay, no, go ahead.
I'm assuming you're not looking for a vote on this tonight?
No, not at all.
Thank you.
No, it was just an info item. It was brought up last week about SPED stabilization. I wanted us to go forward. This is what it is, enacted in 16. So I think it's a reading item, and it's a topic for another day as we go forward, but I didn't want to just drop it on you and say, let's vote on it, let's marinate and discuss what might be best. And I know Chris has got some next steps as far as circuit breaker as we roll into that.
Yeah, I think, so we're good. Is committee's good kind of not going into stabilization fund now? We'll do that subsequently.
Yeah. Well, if we could review it and perhaps do it at our next meeting.
Sure, we can do that.
Is that way there, if we did decide to go forward, to give the towns ample time to get it on the warrant?
Yep, that's correct.
Yep. Okay, so next step. So what I tried to do in talking with Jeff, what we tried to do is come up with kind of a recap of where did we go and what do we do. And I think I hope we answered all of the questions that were asked. Did you have one more or not?
No, actually I do. So,
because I know you went through your notes and I went through my notes and there was one other question that was
just to tie
asked.
up, I think Mr. Galvin asked a question, and John Stanbrook, you might want to help me on this. He asked a question around, let me get my glasses.
Yeah, you got some small print.
Yeah, right. FY18, there was a question on 441,530.50 and where it went. And upon research, it looks like it went to tuitions to collaboratives, professional salaries, and contractual services. In FY19, you were asked about 496, 695, 99. I'm looking at tuition to collaboratives and contractual services at 322, 434, 71. John, do you want to explain that transfer and what happened?
Sure, I don't have my notes in front of me, but I'm going to...
Do the best you can.
Okay, so...
So I think, I want to make sure we're answering the right question.
Was that the
Because I
question,
think it
John?
was your question that, it was, you or Randy had a question about the transfers and how it happened, and
Yeah, so my question was, if it wasn't the way we have been operating with circuit breaker, is that the money has been transferring
to the general fund.
to the general fund. And according to that form, those monies were not transferred to the general fund. So my question was, how did they get paid if they did not go to the general fund to get paid? How did those that all that money get paid out if it didn't get into the general fund?
Okay. John, can you answer that
was
question?
my question. And we know now how it's done by taking the expenses out of the budget. But back then, supposedly, we didn't know that. So my question is how, did the previous business manager understand how to do it? I guess that's kind of where I'm getting at. So.
Okay. I don't know if John can answer that, but
Can't speak for what.
No, but I think so, and I think, John, your question is, or I think your conclusion, perhaps we're looking to validate the conclusion, which is, it appears that based upon the data, that there were transfers done in FY 18 and 19 that did not go into the general fund, that were direct expensed through circuit breaker, which is ultimately where we're trying to get to now. So clearly that doesn't seem to foot with how we were doing the budget. So it looked, maybe there was one process of the budget and then there was something else. I think your point is important for all of us to understand, because again, it just speaks to the inconsistency of how we were doing things. But in terms of actually getting into why did the previous business manager do it that way, I'm not, and I think you understand and appreciate, A, we can't, and B, we can't probably answer, we can't answer that question, or at least you can't.
I can't.
And I don't know if he can. But I think it's a good call out. So kind of getting back to circuit breaker, I hope we've answered all the questions that came through from the committee, the public. You all know how to find us. You're not bashful. So if other questions come up, please continue to ask. We will address them however we need to. But in terms of us moving forward, to recap our meeting, I think we had a long, but based upon feedback, useful conversation last meeting as it pertains to circuit breaker and building an understanding and sharing information. And I'm hoping that as a committee, after speaking with the superintendent, we can kind of agree to a few things. So first, I think one of the takeaways, or a few of the takeaways, were we clearly can do things better, right? We clearly need to make sure we're following best practice and guidance and regulations. And we clearly, as a committee and administration, need to make sure that information is transparently shared with all stakeholders. So when I kind of went back through the notes and listened to the meeting, that was, if I was trying to summarize, that was it, right? I mean, I'm going back looking at it from a personal standpoint. I'm like, man, I wish I understood some of this stuff. When I first got on the committee, I would have asked some very different questions of a previous superintendent, right? Of, wait a second, what's going on here? But at this point, I think we have to accept the accountability of there are things we didn't do right. We have to understand that. But in terms of, okay, what do we do for best practices going forward? There was a few things that we had talked about. And again, I'm just recapping kind of what John had said and Jeff had said and others had shared. So one, as a committee, that we agree until otherwise voted, when we're preparing the budget for the upcoming year, the expected reimbursement for the present year will be utilized to offset special educations in that current budget. That's a long-winded way of saying, as an example, if Whitman-Hanson will receive $1.72 million in circuit breaker in FY22, then $1.72 million will be utilized as a direct offset to eligible special education expenses in the FY23 budget, right? So basically, can't remember who said it, but this year we get money for expenses that were paid last year. We apply that to next year's budget. If we do that, we kind of maintain that one-year carry forward balance. And I think it's important to recognize that A, this creates a transparent plan. We can change the plan, but at least we know what a clear default setting is. This is kind of what we were doing in 13, 14, 15, or whatever it was, and then it changed, right? But we have a clear default setting. It maintains compliance, right? So we make sure that we're following what we should be in terms of maintaining that balance. And the most important thing, I think, is this is a compliance, regulatory compliance position. It's not a budget conversation. To me, this is not, well, what's in the budget, what isn't in the budget. This is kind of how we probably should have been doing circuit breaker all along, and how we probably should handle it going forward, again, unless the committee votes otherwise. So I'm going to pause there. I don't know if we necessarily need to vote that as a motion, or can we just come to a consensus that publicly in this meeting, that's how we're going to handle this going forward. I see nodding heads.
That's a very good plan.
Yeah,
Okay. Does
I
anyone
think the
oppose?
consensus,
yeah.
you know, of the committee is, you know, that's transparent, it's clear, it's concise, it's the way I thought we used to do it, and probably the way we should be doing it.
So second point is, as part of the quarterly financial reports, there will be a disclosure of the balance and the activity in the circuit breaker reimbursement account. This account is presently called circuit breaker in the GL. So this is, again, something that John has already started doing. We have the line, we have the report, we see what's coming in, we see what's coming out, the public can get it, we all have an understanding of what's happening. The other thing that's really helpful here is if something crazy and unanticipated happens, extremely unlikely, very unlikely, but if all of a sudden something happens and we're only getting a fraction of our reimbursement, everyone, not only us, but the public, all the other stakeholders, are going to see the exact same thing on the quarterly report. So if we do have to make a change, then we're going to know why. It's not going to come out of left field and we're all going to be what's happening. So that's kind of point 2. Everyone's good with that. John's already doing it, so that's a pretty simple one. Point 3 is, as part of the budget process for FY23 and going forward, there will be an appendix to the budget that a minimum includes sharing the assumptions relating to special education expense. So again, in talking with these guys, we'll have our normal budget, but we'll have a sheet, right? Because one of the pieces that was clearly missing was understanding the expense. What are the assumptions? We should have a document that says we're assuming the following. We have X students, they have Y costs, this is what we expect to happen. That should be shared, again, without getting into the specifics of any students, I think we all agreed, that should be shared publicly so everyone can see it. So again, if there is a change 6 months later because we built a budget with 37 students and we have 44 or we have 29, we can all pull up the same sheet that was in the budget and look at it and say, oh, okay, we understand. So, consensus? Okay. And then the last item, so those are the 3 main things that I'm trying to, there was a lot of information, so we can talk about this as much as you like, we can add other things, but I was trying to distill it to some somewhat simple points based upon, again, talking to John and Jeff. The last item is for consideration. We don't have to decide tonight, but one thing we could do as an alternative to the stabilization fund is we could earmark a portion of our E&D to special education, right? So we don't have to decide this tonight. When we talk about stabilization funds, I think it's important to understand that stabilization funds, there's a difference between regional districts and municipalities, right? So when you think of a stabilization fund in a municipality, you need a place to kind of put money off to the side in case something crazy happens with special education. As a regional school district, we already have an account that's kind of to that effect, which is E&D. So potentially, as we start to think about budget and E&D, we could say, hey, we're going to maintain a balance of X, and we're going to always have that balance, or at least we're going to have that balance set aside in case something happens with special education that we don't anticipate. Again, we do that publicly, we transparently, everyone understands what it is. We don't have to decide on that tonight. So that was me just going back through notes and listening and trying to come up with what I think I heard. Open to other thoughts from the committee in terms of anything else that we need to do immediately or in the very near term as it pertains to circuit breaker.
Question.
Yeah.
Your last point, as an alternative to stabilization, earmarking E&D. Could another alternative be actually setting up a revolving account called circuit breaker? I don't know how that mechanics works.
Can we do that, John, legally?
No.
Okay.
So
There's no, like you have an athletic revolving account, we have
Great
food
question.
services
Good question.
revolving account,
We
just
asked about
throwing it out there.
No, he said no.
Okay, okay. The answer's no, okay. Just, yeah,
he likes the idea, he just doesn't think we can swing it under MGL.
that's fine, we're crossing it all out.
So, and again, the last one we don't have to decide. I just wanted to plant the seed because as we start talking about the budget and E&D, again, this wasn't my idea. I got it from someone else. That last point, I thought as soon as they said it, I was like, that's a really interesting way to look at it. Because again, if you think of municipalities, right? If you're the town of Hanover and you want to put some money aside in case something crazy happens here, well, how are you going to do it? You could do it in the town through like the general stabilization fund, but it's not really earmarked. So Food for thought. Okay, anything else? Okay, anything from the public? Okay. The only, so I think that is, no, we move on to subcommittee reports. Thank you, everyone, for that help there. Subcommittees, who do we have first? Facilities?
Facilities, Mike, you want to?
Yeah, we met today at 5:30. We went over Whitman Middle School mold issues. It seems to be taken care of. In Hanson Middle School, one of the boilers is down. We're going to have to do a pipe freeze in order to sanction up one of the boilers so we can work on the other boiler and keep it going. We went through the playground reports, and it seems most are good, and we're going to have to visit Whitman, one school in Whitman, Duval, most likely going to need a new playground. We were updated on the phone replacement, and they're going out to bids, and should be on track.
And just one additional thing, Mike. Fred had asked a question about grants, and Steve Burke, being who Steve Burke is, already found $68,000 in grants to assist in the phone project, so.
Actually, no, he found $357,600 plus another $68,000 between him and George Farrow, so.
That's right.
So they're working behind the scenes to lessen the cost of that project, which is good, because we're gonna need money for the playgrounds.
I mean, yeah, but, you know, realize the impact. That's over $400,000. I think that, you know, George, Steve, if you're watching, thank you. That's, you know, good work. Great work.
Policy.
Policy?
So, Chris, I was just gonna say, we were supposed to meet on Wednesday, the 5th, and we had to postpone. We have a draft of the administrator's contract that I just wanted to run by the policy subcommittee one more time before we presented it here. So we're going to plan a meeting prior to February 9th and get that done.
Great. Negotiations, I don't think we have anything to report.
We're just going to meet with ground rules next week.
Ground rules next week, sorry. And then we didn't have it on here, but quickly on budget, we did meet before this. And there was a couple things I just wanted to share with the committee before we take off. So I looked at our next, so we talked generally about the budget process as it's being built. And then I went back and I looked at our scope document, just to kind of refresh in terms of what did we say we were going to do and what have we done so far. So in terms of acting as a sounding board for the business director, I think that's gone well. We continue to do that. In terms of reaching out to both boards of selectmen and finance committee with a document asking for feedback, we've done that. To date, we haven't heard anything, but certainly welcome that. We talked about, and this came up in our finance committee today, one of the things we wanted to do was a 3-year review and a 5-year look forward. And we wanted to get that to the school committee. So John has started to work through a template, but we need to build some assumptions into the template. And at this point, given where we are in the time horizon, the fact that the budget is now a couple weeks away, we're going to hold off and do that after the budget and probably use the assumptions from the budget in that spreadsheet. So just as an update there. The item that we spent a little time talking on today was the FY23 budget. So we're kind of looking at kind of what we had thought we were going to do and what we're doing. So the challenge that we're having as a subcommittee is for us to be a sounding board and do a full review of the budget, we would be bypassing the February 2nd public budget hearing, which we're not really comfortable doing because it would basically mean that the public would have access to the budget a week before the school committee does. So unless the school committee feels otherwise, we're gonna allow the February 2nd public budget hearing to happen. We will then take feedback charge from the committee and kind of work through any adjustments then. So the February 2nd, just so the public understands, the February 2nd public budget hearing is the first time any of us as school committee members are seeing the budget. So that is our, you know, just to clarify folks watching at home, you know, we have to follow, public meeting is a little different, right? We have to follow that. So we don't get the budget in advance. I don't get an advance copy. No one gets an advance copy. The administration's going to put it together. It will be shared on February 2nd. The school committee will have some feedback. We meet again the following week. I'm sure there'll be a lot more feedback, and then we'll kind of go from there. So we're going to use the budget subcommittee to really probably dig in and spend some quality time with John after we've started to get that feedback. So you might want us to look at X or Y or Z. We'll take the charge of the full committee. We'll use that to kind of do that process. So just kind of wanted to report out on that. This is a new committee, as are some of the other ones, so we're kind of learning as we go, and just, again, wanted to make sure the full committee was aware of what we're doing. Okay, I think we got through everything. Is Allison here for the polar plunge? You are?
Yep.
Okay, so I know we did public comment and no one was here, but come on up. No, hey, if you're gonna sit here, if you're gonna sit here for 2.5 hours, we'll give you 3 minutes. Go ahead.
So, hi everyone, I'm Allison Dillon, here on behalf of the Hanson PTO. Just wanted to give a plug for the polar plunge that we have upcoming on February 6th, really to just raise money for the PTO, which supports, enrichment activities, things like that at the Indian Head. We had great participation with the school committee in the past. I know Hillary already signed up. She was one of the first people. I think Chris
Also
signed
my
up as
birthday,
well.
so.
I kept trying to put it off, but then you said you were gonna see me tonight, and I'm like,
I know. So here to just really encourage participation, especially for the Hanson folks, but also for, Whitman counterparts to, welcome to participate, also donate, and would love the community, it's a great event, so would love, anyone to come, join in, see their favorite teachers, administration, et cetera, jump in the freezing water. So I'm really just wanted to give a plug for that, see if people had questions. I know I've emailed you guys a couple of times, and we're really trying to promote on social media, things like that, so.
awesome. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
How many folks you have so far signed up?
We have, I think, about 35 right now.
Yeah.
We're trying to get closer to 50.
Well,
so
if I wasn't
you
at
wanna
this,
jump.
if I wasn't at this meeting, someone at this table would have
Would sign you up.
funded me, fully funded.
Lizzie,
He's got-
100 and if you get your father in the water.
We're going to get him in, so I'll hold you to that. But
Going a different
I
direction
know,
this
Jeff,
year.
you said you
I'm
might
in.
be interested, so.
All right. Thank you for coming.
I think I'm still in Mexico,
Wow.
so I'll film you me
Not
going
sure,
into the
not sure the current weather is helping, but that's.
Yeah,
I
right,
know,
right.
Today wasn't the best day. to
Hanson
go.
Fire will get the ice cutting machinery out.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, I think that's everything on the agenda, so
Motion to adjourn?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. Have a great night. Thank you, everyone.